Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. And shalom to you all. Have you ever wondered why Islam cannot accomplish peace in the Muslim community and in the world? Why Islam or the religion of Islam have become such a death cult? Okay. So this is very important question to answer, and so I'm going to answer the concern or the subject matter, and we're going to start from the very fundamental in the religion of Islam, and that is the notion of God and the duty of the messenger that related to the Prophet Muhammad as belief in Islam. So please understand that Allah as a deity in Islam sounds like very angry and sadistic type of God. And God in Islam completely detached from reality. So Allah as a deity has no awareness how this nature works, completely oblivious to what's going on in your life and how you feel about things and what's going on in your head. And Allah as a deity or as God has no understanding what you do in the morning until you go to bed. So, and then we have the messenger that he sends as a prophet that Islam believes or Muslims believe as the last prophet. As it turns out, the Prophet Muhammad is not a good source of morality and spirituality, because according to the hadith portray the Prophet Muhammad more like a tyrant who doesn't possess the character ethic or uswatun hasana that we heard in tradition of Islam or in Muslims community. So uswatun hasana or character ethic completely absents from the Islamic practices that preached by the Prophet. What you will find in the traditions, the Prophet Muhammad so much like a warlord who completely disregard for human rights, for human aspiration and the dignity. So let's take a look at some of the verses that Islam uses through certain interpretations of the Quran to justify why Islam cannot possibly achieve peace in the Muslims community and in the world. Among of the verses is verse 35, chapter 47, and chapter Muhammad, by the way. So that verse, the translation that standard translation that Muslims use, in that translation saying that Muslims should not make peace with people outside of Islam. Think about that. The Muslims should not make peace with people outside of Islam. And that's why peace cannot be possibly achieved no matter what you offer, no matter how reasonable you are. They still reject it because they're not supposed to make peace. All right? So look it up. Verse 35, chapter 47. That's how they translate the Quran. And then looking into verse 51, chapter 5, that Muslims should not elect anybody who is outside of the Muslim community or outside of Islamic faith, and should not trust or work with with people outside of a religion of Islam. Okay, and then we have verse 6, chapter 98. And the point in there is that people outside of Islam are the worst creatures. And think about the three verses that I just articulated. Put that together. How no wonder the attitude of Muslims largely toxic toward other human beings, in particular toward other faith, be Christians, Jews, Hindus, or non-affiliation to religion. So they have this, Muslims tend to have this paranoia or psychopath type of illness because of this such a teaching. And that's because the error in translations that need to be corrected. But that's what they use. That's what they embrace. It's very difficult to suggest if there are some good interpretations in the Quran or any part of the Quran that healthy, that useful for them to embrace, to live by, and they don't like it. But the one that drive them into madness, and that's what they use, and that's what they devoted their life for. Okay. And then we have why Islam cannot produce tolerance because of interpretation as such I just described. So let's take a look at other part of the Quran that Islam use to manipulate people. Let's say, for example, verse 256, Surah Al-Baqarah, concerning no compulsion in religion. All right. So no compulsion in religion is supposed to be easy sell to Muslims. But in reality, that's not what's happening. The reason it's so difficult to sell no compulsion in religion to Muslims is because they cancel that verse because of the Sharia law. Sharia law rejects any notion, any idea that produce tolerance, that produce free thoughts, that produce self-discovery, that produce facts, so we know what what we're looking at. So Sharia law reject all of that. In fact, Sharia law reject the reality. Whatever you see in the nature of the world, the Sharia law rejects that as a base of, source of what the truth is. Because Sharia law believes there is another truth after life, after we dead. We all dead. That's kind of idea. That brings to, let's say, for example, verse 36, that do not follow what you don't understand. Right? If you think about it, that idea should be easy sell to Muslim who seeking the truth or champion for the truth. In fact, that's not what's happening. Verse 36, chapter 17, do not follow what you don't understand. It's very difficult to sell to Muslim, to persuade them to embrace and to live by that. Because Muslims are taught to follow what they don't understand. And they should not question it. Because the Muslims are taught to, because they are here, and they should follow or obey. Hear, obey. Sami'na wa ata'na. Yeah, we hear, we obey. We don't question, we don't analyze, we don't understand. We should not understand. We must not understand. Because if you're trying to understand, that deviates from Aqidah. From the foundation of Islam or Tawheed. So you're not supposed to understand, just follow blindly, completely blindly, in the name of faith. So that's drives, because of that attitude, drives Muslim into ignorance. And that ignorance leads to violence and savages. Okay, so now let me expand a little bit even further why Islam cannot embrace liberty and tolerance and secularism and democracy and human rights. Okay, it's because verse 191, chapter Al-Baqarah, and many other verses. I'm just pointing out this is one of them. And one of the points in there to wage war against other religious persuasions. And in another part of that verse, any critical thinking will be considered fitna. And then fitna will be considered as a sedition, and that sedition is worse than killing. You see how they play with that. So you can if you think critically, that will be considered sedition or fitna, and fitna is worse than killing. This is how they justify bloodshed and killing in the name of God. The minute you have critical thinking and trying to analyze the certain particular claim, trying to find what the truth is, and that will put you into a person who are not a true believer. Okay, even though you're not even ever claim that you are outside, or leaving Islam, you're just trying to understand the facts, what the facts are. Okay, to separate between falsehood and the facts. Any effort to do that will be considered fitna, and that will be that will shaken the religion, the position of the religion. That practice makes many Muslims unwilling to do discovery, unwilling to go beyond what they are told, unwilling to think critically and do contemplation and meditation to reflect what they are told. Because in other verse, for example, verse 216, Surah Al-Baqarah, suggests one of the points in there that whatever God has pointing to humans is the law of God, is and that is the best, even though we don't understand. So this is the trap. By using that verse 216 in Surah Al-Baqarah, when Allah makes a certain protocol that we don't understand, but we have to follow what we don't understand, this makes Muslims are trapped into darkness because they have to embrace dogmas, and they don't know what is it that they're doing. And they cannot evaluate. They cannot possibly evaluate because it's coming from God, thing that's so absurd and so and so abhorrent, and that makes you feel like throw up in a way. But you have to do it because it's coming from God, and we should not supposed to question. So that's how makes if you ever wonder why the attitude of Muslims seem to be not tend less to open to facts and to evidence, is because evidence very painful, right? So evidence it is painful. And then we're looking into other verse that the same that has value that I think detrimental to our mental health. For example, verse 12, chapter 8, concerning the torture against other human beings, and how Allah torture people just because they're unable to reason or cannot possibly persuaded by dogmas and unfounded claims. And then we have verse 123, chapter 9. In that verse, you will find the translations standard translation, you will find saying something to the effect that you have to hate your neighbors. And that's kind of teaching that I think is quite harmful to our mental health and our way of being, by abandoning our heart, what's going on in how our heart feel, and then that abandons our humanity. And then let me move on. In Islam, what makes it hard for Islam to accomplish or to exhibit peace in Muslim communities and in the world is because we are asked to love the Prophet Muhammad more than we love ourselves, which psychologically impossible and is not healthy. While the Prophet Muhammad, according to traditions, making Muslim or asking Muslims to do harm to society, the society in the name of God through the establishment of Sharia law, or any teaching to coerce people, to force people to perform rituals and to take shahada, and to do all that things, and to commit to do violent jihad to establish the religion. So that makes perpetuate violence in the Muslim community, because the teaching of the Prophet does not represent character ethic, does not seem to be fitted with the concept of uswatun hasanah that you find in the Quran. Uswatun hasanah means a character ethic or high moral statutes. And that's why the Prophet Muhammad is not a good source of morality or spirituality, because within the traditions of Islam, mainly Hadith, Sirah Muhammad, and opinions of madhabs, you will find that those material presents the Prophet Muhammad as a warlord who completely disregard for human dignity and human rights. So that makes a situation difficult if you find yourself, why is it so difficult to persuade Muslims to be rational, to have sense of humanity, and how they practice the Islam that they embrace. So the answer is right there in the material, that in the interpretations of the Quran, and also in the Hadith, and in opinions of madhabs. And I was talking about when the Prophet Muhammad violated certain protocol, very fundamental protocol from the Quran, that the duty of the messenger only to deliver the message, you will find in the Quran verse 80, chapter 4, and earlier I mentioned verse 256, Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah 2, and then you will find in verse 99, Surah Al-Ma'idah, Surah 5, and then you will find in Surah 88, verse 22. Okay, so those are amongst the verses, but some other areas that you will find that the duty of the messenger only to deliver. He doesn't have any other duty other than just to deliver. But in reality, the messenger, in this case the Prophet Muhammad, completely violates that very protocol as a messenger. That makes the Prophet Muhammad is not qualified as the messenger of God.